If the fruits are technically manifestations of will, is it possible that Bonney is not just the first user, but also the progenitor of the fruit due to her will to change her age? Yes and no. Mostly no. But also some yes. I really love the idea that Bonney's desire to grow older was so immensely powerful that she willed a magical fruit into existence. But that idea kind of gets killed pretty immediately on the next page when one of the country's many elderly decrepit citizens pulls out a devil fruit encyclopedia and diagnoses the ability with no problems at all as Bonney repeatedly screams, "Granny time! Granny time!" However, as always, there are howevers, and I've got two explanations for you. One is a perfectly reasonable conclusion based on all of the available fictional evidence, and the other is pure conspiracy theory, but it's fun. At this point in One Piece, I definitely don't believe that Bonney eating this fruit was an accident or even a serendipitous act of fate, but I also don't believe that this was someone's plan or intention. What I think is that Bonney's powerful desire to become older did play a part in what happened here, because as of chapter 1044, we now live in a reality where devil fruits have wills of their own. In many cases, it seems like the devil fruit can choose its user. So the magical fruit, it's doing whatever it does, and it senses Bonney's desire somewhere over there. And at the first available opportunity, the magical fruit presents itself for consumption. Whether that's reincarnating in Bonney's pile of food, or whether it's more One Ring-like, like say there's an accident on a ship, the fruit is lost at sea, and then ends up washing up on the Sorbet Kingdom. One of the island's many elderly picks it up, donates it to the church, and then bam, we're in business. Fruit business. It would be a really great way to explain not just Bonney's fruit, but everyone's. One Piece has always been a world where every devil fruit user somehow ends up with the perfect fruit for their particular gimmick, desires, profession, or even name. Smoker, for example, ate a smoke fruit, which is a bit too convenient, unless he renamed himself Smoker and took up smoking later in order to sound and look cooler. It's such a wonderful excuse for creativity though, to have a world where you don't need to logically explain all of these coincidences, because the system of the story is built around manifestations of desire and willpower. But also, I did promise a conspiracy theory, which is that this devil fruit was misidentified by the old man with the encyclopedia. It may present abilities similar to the Toshitoshi no Mi, but it may be a different fruit altogether that Bonney has manifested through sheer power of will. The reason why this is more of a crackpot take is because Oda outright stated that Bonney's fruit is the Toshitoshi no Mi in a recent SBS. So for this to work, you would have to believe that Oda is purposely misleading us in all of the extended material as well. But then again, he did also tell us that Luffy's devil fruit was the Gomu Gomu no Mi for a quarter of a century before revealing that it was in fact not that. So I don't want to count anything out because this flashback has already caught me off guard a couple of times. So I should also say that it's been proposed that Bonney had already eaten the devil fruit while she was on Marijois. Perhaps a World Noble thought that it would be pretty lol if he spiked a baby's food with a devil fruit and just didn't tell anyone. Because then, imagine this, right? Years down the line when that child is learning to swim, they go to their first class and they drown. Classic World Noble comedy. And it's definitely not something that I would put past them. I wouldn't put anything past them now. Although we do have a shot of Bonney being bathed by Kuma, so I imagine that they might have figured it out around then if this was the case. Something I proposed in the last video is that the previous user died, and then the fruit just happened to reincarnate in Bonney's meal, which upon further reflection presents a pretty terrifying prospect. Because as a devil fruit user at any given time, if you're eating fruit, there is a low but not non-existent chance that it could end up becoming a devil fruit at the last second and you could end up killing yourself. So if I was Luffy, Bonney, or Big Mom, I mentioned those three because they're the most uncontrollable gluttons, but if I was any devil fruit user, I would swear off eating fruit for the rest of my life. It is just too risky. If Buccaneer blood is different from human, is it possible that they can consume multiple devil fruits? Alright, I think I see where you're going with this. And that was a very curious line in this chapter, Kuma asking what makes his blood so special. And my interpretation of what Vegapunk says is that he doesn't have enough Buccaneer blood to really dive into and solve that Buccaneer mystery. So is it a coincidence that when Vegapunk does stumble upon blood, like lots of blood, all of the blood he could ever want, I mean Kuma spills it for everyone else, so why not Vegapunk as well? But after gaining access to this, Vegapunk develops green blood, which is used to power the Seraphim and allows them to swap in and out their various fruits and abilities. So perhaps the green blood is augmented Buccaneer blood, which would also explain why all of the Seraphim Seraphim are so unbelievably tough. Esper definitely has some Buccaneer information in him, but after seeing Kuma tank so much punishment in this flashback, I feel like Buccaneer genes are the only thing that could make our Seraphim this impervious to damage. That and the combined Lunarian flame effect, of course. And Stella did claim that they were the strongest form of humanity, so I'd be willing to bet that there's a fair bit of Buccaneer at play here. To get to what the commenter was hinting at though, let's bring out our chonky hippo, because ever since the concept of Buccaneers was revealed, it's been speculated that Blackbeard may be one as well, because he's big, like really big. Even by One Piece standards, he chonk. And if there was a body type out there that could withstand the stresses of consuming two mighty magical fruits, then again, I would have to put my money on a Buccaneer. Although that still wouldn't explain the mystery of why he allegedly never sleeps. I love how specific Kuma's travel ability is. It's like an open world game. You can't quick travel to a place you haven't explored before. It does feel a bit like that. You enter a new area and you get your waypoint, but in Kuma's case, he just needs very precise coordinates. Because when you think about it, his devil fruit is extraordinarily dangerous to use in anything less than a perfect manner. You can't just teleport yourself in a random direction because the overwhelming possibility in this world is that you're going to land in water, become an anchor, and drown to death. Which actually brings up a fun fact. So I've been going back on a lot of Kuma stuff in the past few weeks or so, and despite having sent Luffy to Amazon Lily, I don't know if Kuma ever actually went there himself. When Rayleigh arrives on the island to find Luffy, all he says is that he found out the general direction that Luffy had been pushed in, which Rayleigh guessed would be roughly around Amazon Lily. So one way you could read the situation is that Kuma made a rough estimate, and I think it's over there, good luck, and he was just hoping that Luffy would hit the right spot. Although I personally believe that Kuma didn't have the time to give Rayleigh any specific details due to all of the Kizaru stuff happening, and Rayleigh had to calculate the destination himself after seeing Luffy disappear. Although it's possible that Kuma does go to Amazon Lily, but we just haven't seen it yet. Bartholomew Kuma has a history of being used as a messenger for the Seven Warlords, as we saw with Gecko Moria on Thriller Bark, so I do think it's very reasonable to assume that he acted as an obedient messenger for the world government in general, although we still haven't seen him become a warlord yet, which really surprises me because this flashback is quite rapidly approaching modern day. I mean, we don't get a breakdown of exactly how many years pass in this chapter, but Bonney was 6 years old when Bakori came back and the one-man revolution happened. And time definitely passes after that because we see Bonney age. She ages even without the help of her fruit. She is definitely older in the latter part of this chapter than the beginning, and I would say quite rapidly approaching 10, which is why Kuma is getting progressively more desperate. At the rate we're going, this flashback could actually end at the moment that Luffy sets out to sea, because that was the year that Bonney turned 10. Can somebody explain to me who is Connie? I'm so confused. Sure, I'm a qualified somebody, and it is a little bit confusing because of the whole who is and who was king business. So firstly, Bakori was the king of Sorbet until Kuma revoluted him. I don't know if that's a verb or even a word, but we're going with it. Either way, after Bakori was removed, Kuma was essentially peer pressured into becoming the new king of Sorbet, which he did take on in title alone. However, he gave the actual kingly duties to Bulldog. And this is where it gets slightly confusing, because Bulldog was the king of Sorbet before Bakori as well. It's unknown how Bakori came to power or if he was related to Bulldog, as monarchies tend to be, but Connie is Bulldog's mother, and she is the Queen Dowager, which means widow of a king. So she was married to the king before Bulldog, who was Kuma, but before Kuma, who was Bakori, but before Bakori, who was Bulldog again, but before him. Essentially, the Sorbet monarchy is a bit of a mess. It genuinely is like a war of kings, because there are 3 people who have that title, or who want that title right now. But the reason why we know who Connie is because Jewelry Bonney impersonated her in chapter 908 during the Reverie. So ever since then, we've been eagerly anticipating the revelation of how Bonney is related to Connie, and if Connie is Kuma's mother or grandmother or aunt, but as it turns out, completely unrelated. Aesthetically, Bonney and Connie are twins, but only very coincidentally. Unless Bonney is actually using a distorted future, one where she was born into Connie's family. That is possible. Bonney can definitely do that, because the distorted future version of herself that we did see is quite clearly Bonney if she was Kuma's biological daughter and had that Buccaneer lineage factor. Are we just going to ignore that Foxy was a Marine? So most of you probably recognize Jeet and Abdullah, but did you catch the alleged Foxy cameo? It comes from this panel. Saint Saturn is in his old man chair, and there's a Marine reporting to him with a suspiciously split-shaped head that is, of course, an iconic aspect of Foxy's design. It's so iconic that most of his crew wear masks to mimic that sort of split design. But to answer the question, yes, we are going to ignore it because it's probably not true. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh yeah, it's that time of year. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates it, which this year is kind of me. And what I'm personally thankful for is not trees, mostly because this year was the debut of the Luffy balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which was on track to be another glorious showcase of One Piece on the world stage, but then a tree got in the way and ended up popping Luffy's straw hat.
Oh no! Oh no!
So what we ended up with was Bucket Hat Luffy casually making his way through Manhattan, as well as one of my personal favorite pieces of fan art ever, which is the tree giving Luffy his floppy hat. I tell you what, this is why Shanks had to be at Wano. Because according to balloon power scaling, Green Bull all but solos Luffy. One thing I don't understand is how was Saturn listening and hearing about Kuma and Dragon, and he let Vegapunk get away with it for so long? Well, we have yet to see if anyone gets away with anything here. In fact, going by the current evidence, it looks an awful lot like Saturn definitely took the dub. To add to my Saturn praise from the last video, what I really like about this situation is seeing a battle of intelligence. I'm a big fan of the idea that stories are only as strong as their villains, and also that having a well-crafted villain is even more important than having a solid hero. So when you introduce a new hero who is known as the smartest man in the world, you've got to match that brain power with a force capable of foiling it, which is the role that I think Saint Saturn is currently occupying. I also think that we are long overdue to see why the Five Elders are essentially the ultimate antagonists of the world. Not just in terms of physical power, but more importantly, how they're able to carefully analyze and manipulate global events to their advantage. I mean, they seem to spend all day every day in that one-room think tank, so surely some good ideas come out of it every now and then. Imagine Kuma's memory bubble returning not to him, but to his clones, making the pacifista actually protecting the weak. I kind of love this idea. Instead of giving them some sort of inbuilt traitor mechanism, they all regain the memories of their original self. Kuma himself did say that these bubbles eventually have to go back to where they came from. And look, how's the bubble gonna know which Kuma clone is the real one? And would the bubble even care? It's a bubble. But it would give Kuma's inevitable sacrifice that much more meaning. Because right now, my assumption is that the memories would go back into his body, the original body. But if Kuma dies before that happens and the memories, they may need to find another vessel, which would then overtake the programming of the pacifista, much like how we've seen with the Seraphim personalities, and we would end up with an army of Bartholomew Kumai, not pacifistas, Bartholomew Kumas. The mysterious person that arrives at Egghead turns out to be King Bakori once again. Yeah, you know, why not? That presence that Luffy felt at the end of chapter 1090 where he said, "Someone's here, someone's strong." Turns out it's not Kizaru, it's not Saturn, it's Bakori again, because he just will not go away. Kuma and Bakori have probably spent more time on screen together than Kuma and Ivankov. Am I the bad guy for wanting to see people eat devil fruits and fight to the death at God Valley? Yes. Kuma did ask Dragon. It was one of the first people he asks. Right, this is an important correction, because in the review video, I casually questioned why Kuma didn't ask Dragon for any information before embarking on his world tour. But that's because he kind of did in chapter 1098. When Bonney's condition was discovered, Kuma left the Revolutionary Army and Dragon said, "Very well, live without regrets. We'll ask every doctor in the world that we can." Now, again, even if Dragon did tell Kuma about Vegapunk, there's the probability that Kuma wouldn't have been able to reach him. But I also feel like Dragon saying that they'll ask every doctor in the world should probably include Vegapunk as well. We've seen during Egghead Island that they did have a pretty direct line to one another, so I definitely don't think it would have been impossible to get in contact with Vegapunk. But also, Dragon didn't necessarily need to. He just needed to point Kuma in the right direction, and it's another situation where Dragon did nothing. Again, Ginny got captured, they knew where she was. Should we try and go after her? Nah. Kuma's child comes down with the world's rarest disease, but you know what? We know a doctor who is so medically advanced that he's practically a sorcerer. Should we ask him about the disease? Nah. Should we at least tell the girl's father about this doctor? Nah. This flashback is definitely not doing any favors for Dragon. And I get the reason why none of this happens is because, they don't have the forces to launch an assault on Marijois. And perhaps on Punk Hazard, Vegapunk was completely uncontactable. The actual issue here isn't Dragon, it's Kuma. His Devil Fruit ability is so broken that none of that should matter. There is no place on this planet that can stop him teleporting in and out. So I do find it pretty crazy that he never even tried to go to Marijois. And I find it equally as crazy that Dragon didn't at least tell him about Vegapunk. And with Dragon in particular, it'd just be nice to see him make an effort for a change, because this flashback is making me lose all faith in him being the man to lead a global revolution. Is this the first time Dragon's ship has been confirmed to be all black? No, but this has always been a bit of a debated point. The first time I recall seeing the ship during the day was chapter 593, when the Wind Grandma, that's its name, was docked at Baltigo. The time of day is important because we did see it at night prior to that. But the anime took this as a bit of a stylistic choice and gave the ship a more regular color scheme. And as for the adaptation of the anime day scene, if I recall correctly, they decided not to include the ship at all. Anyway, the only reason why anyone cares about it being a a black ship is because of Lafitte. In chapter 1081, he drops a clue about the man with the burn scar, also known as the man marked by flames, stating that he sails on a pitch black ship that swallows enemies in a gigantic vortex should they wander too close. So maybe it's a red herring, but this is such a specific detail. Dragon has a pitch black ship. We see a lot of it in this chapter. And he almost certainly has a weather-related devil fruit that is capable of conjuring vortexes. And at this stage, it would be a pretty huge shock if he was not the man with the burn scar, and therefore the man that everyone's looking for to get that final road poneglyph. The only thing that really goes against this is that surely he would have told Robin if he had important poneglyph information, because she didn't even know that road poneglyphs existed before Zoe. But then again, withholding information and actions is also very consistent with the dragon we know. And hey, maybe that's why he never really does anything. He's too injured from all of his burn scars. That, or there's someone else on board who Dragon is protecting. But either way, all signs are pointing in this general direction right now. So you let me know in the comments. Do you think that Dragon is the man marked by flames?